Its silence was a promise of judgment. Commander Alara Vance stood on the bridge of the survey vessel Pathfinder, her gaze fixed on the void. Before them hung the obsidian anchorage, a graveyard of forgotten titans. Wreckage from a dozen empires littered the star-dusted darkness. Yet one vessel remained untouched, a relic of impossible antiquity. Its hull absorbed all light, a perfect, seamless obsidian dart a dozen kilometers long. There were no scars, no breaches, no signs of the war that had claimed its brethren. This was the anomaly. Her mission concerned the source of a whisper-thin signal that sang a song of pure mathematics. The ship's sleeping arrays traced patterns of cosmic law against the ether. "Anything new, Solon?" she asked, her voice calm. The ship's AI manifested as a cool blue light spiraling on the main holotank. "Negative, Commander. The object maintains thermal equilibrium with the cosmic background. Its energy signature remains a recursive null-state algorithm. It is for all intents and purposes a ghost." Vance allowed herself a small, thin smile. Ghosts don't broadcast prime numbers. The structure defied every known principle of precursor engineering. It was older, cleaner, a thing of terrifying purpose left sleeping in a boneyard. Her mandate was clear: observe, catalog, and do not touch. The stakes were the unwritten laws of 1,000 systems, each fearing the awakening of ancient powers. An old truth held that some doors should never be opened. Her tactical officer, Yorick, shifted his weight at his console. "Commander, we have company." Gilded Scrapper Contingent, 3 vessels accelerating on an intercept course with the artifact. His tone was clipped professional, but the underlying tension was palpable. These were not mere scavengers. The Gilded Scrappers were organized looters, pirates, who melted down history for a quick profit. They saw a prize, not a mystery. Vance felt a cold knot form in her stomach. The law was her only weapon in this void. Solon's light pulsed. Their energy profiles are consistent with industrial-grade plasma cutters and gravitic anchors. Their intent is unambiguous. They mean to carve the artifact apart. The AI's logic was a stark and brutal razor. The Scrappers operated with brazen impunity, knowing the larger galactic powers were too ponderous to intervene over a single derelict. But this was no mere derelict. Vance knew it in her bones. That sleeping giant was something else entirely. It was a testament to an age of impossible works. She straightened her uniform tunic, the simple gray fabric, a stark contrast to the glittering chaos outside. "Open a channel, Lana," she ordered her communications specialist. "Broadcast in the clear. Remind them of Interdiction Protocol 7 Delta. This is a designated archaeological site under Centauri Compact Authority." Lena's fingers danced over her console. "Channel open, Commander. Broadcasting now." A moment of silence stretched, filled only by the low hum of the Pathfinder's life support. The Scrapper ships did not deviate. Their engines flared with aggressive intent, their course unwavering. A response finally came, a gravelly voice dripping with contempt. "Compact Authority doesn't reach this far, little bird. The only law in the anchorage is what you can hold. Stand down or we'll make you another piece of scrap for the collection." The voice was a promise of casual violence. Yorick's knuckles were white on his console's edge. "They are charging main weapons." His gaze met hers in the reflection of the screen. Her authority was being tested. Her mandate was being shattered. The weight of her orders felt like a physical chain. She was a scientist, a diplomat, not a warrior. Yet the sanctity of this place demanded a guardian. The sleeping thing deserved more than to be rendered into slag. This quiet place held a deeper meaning. "Solon, what are our options?" Vance asked, her voice steady despite the tremor she felt inside. "Option 1, retreat," the AI stated flatly. "We are outgunned 3-1. The probability of mission survival is 97% if we withdraw now." The AI's calculus was always pure. Option 2, engage. Probability of mission survival drops to 14%. Probability of protecting the artifact is less than 3%. There was always a third option. There had to be. She looked at the obsidian ship, a perfect void in a field of broken things. It did not reflect the starlight. It consumed it. The artifact was a statement of profound and ancient power. Maybe, just maybe, it was time for it to speak again. She would not let this place be desecrated by thieves. A young family huddled inside their asteroid mining claim 20,000 kilometers from the unfolding drama. The father watched the faint, distant flares of engines through a reinforced porthole. "The big ships are arguing again, Mara," he said to his daughter, who was tracing patterns on the frosted viewport. He had heard the stories from other prospectors, tales of a ghost ship that slept in the heart of the anchorage. Some said it sang to them in their dreams. He just hoped the argument would stay distant. Their tiny habitat was no place for a war. Survival here was a ledger of carefully managed resources, not a contest of arms. "Hold our position," Vance commanded, her voice ringing with newfound authority. "Lena, reroute all auxiliary power to the main transmitter. I want the tightest beam you can manage aimed directly at the artifact's forward section." Lena's eyes widened slightly. "Commander, that will broadcast our own position with absolute clarity." It was a move that defied conventional stealth tactics. "That is the point," Vance said. "Solon, I want you to start transmitting data. Not a warning, not a threat, a lesson." This was a gambit born of desperation and intuition. She would not fight them with weapons. She would fight them with proof. A story must be told even to the deaf. The AI's light flickered, a sign of its complex models running through an unexpected variable. "What data, Commander?" "Everything," she declared. "Start with the foundational legal codes of the first expansion. The Deimos Accords. The Treaty of Unwritten Spheres. Transmit the core principles of stewardship, of archaeological preservation, of non-interference. Show it our mission charter. Show it everything that proves we are here to learn, not to conquer." She was speaking not to the scrappers, but to the obsidian ship itself. An offering of law to a silent judge. The scrapper leader, Kalen, laughed as the transmission flooded his comms. "What is this?" "She's reading us poetry." "Fire a warning shot." Something close enough to make them smell their own scorched hull. A lance of brilliant plasma erupted from his lead ship, slicing through the void. It passed a mere 100 meters from the Pathfinder's bow, a blistering promise of what would come next. The heat signature washed over their hull, a tangible threat. Yorick gritted his teeth. Shields flared, but holding. "That was not a warning shot, Commander. That was a rangefinder." Vance ignored him, her focus absolute. The obsidian ship remained inert. The hum it emitted, the mathematical song, had not changed. It felt like she was telling a story to a stone. Had she miscalculated? Was it just a dead thing after all? The universe was filled with beautiful, silent rocks, but her gut screamed otherwise. There was a logic here that she could feel. "They are beginning their cutting sequence," Solon reported coolly. "The lead scrapper vessel is deploying high-energy plasma torches on manipulator arms." This was it. The moment of desecration. The moment her peaceful, lawful approach was proven a failure. A wave of doubt washed over her. The cost of her conviction might be the very thing she sought to protect. Yet she held her ground. Her will was a shield against the encroaching chaos. And then something changed. The hum from the artifact shifted. It wasn't a change in volume, but in texture and complexity. The simple recursive loop of prime numbers blossomed into a symphony of interwoven equations. It was a response, an acknowledgement. The sleeping mind was stirring not with anger, but with curiosity. It had been listening. It had been learning. Commander, the artifact's energy signature is changing. Lena gasped, her instruments suddenly alive with data. It's resonant. It's matching the frequency of our transmission, but amplifying it, clarifying it. On the main screen, the obsidian hull shimmered. A single razor-thin line of silver light appeared, tracing a complex sigil across the bow. It was a symbol of perfect balance, a set of scales interwoven with a logarithmic spiral. It was a mark of law, a sign of ancient judgment. The artifact was not a warship. It was a court. Kalen's voice crackled over the comm. "What is that, some kind of light show? Ignore it. Cut the prize open." His ship's plasma torches flared to life, lancing out towards the perfect obsidian hull. But they never reached it. 100 meters from the surface, the brilliant streams of energy simply stopped. They were caught, held suspended in the void by an invisible force. The energy was being absorbed, catalogued, understood. The artifact was not defending itself. It was gathering evidence. The ledger was being opened. The sigil on its hull pulsed with a soft silver light. A new transmission emanated from it, overriding every channel. It wasn't a voice. It was a pure concept, a direct infusion of understanding into the minds of every person in the system. We are the witness. The thought was ancient, vast, and utterly serene. It spoke of ages beyond counting. We record, we measure, we remember. The plasma from the scrapper ship was turned back on itself, not as a violent reflection, but as a perfect, controlled return. The energy flowed back along its original path, not to destroy, but to disarm. The plasma torches overloaded their emitters, melting into slag. The manipulator arms seized their joints, fused solid. The attack had been counted and returned to sender. It was a perfect mathematical rebuttal. Kalen's ship reeled, its forward sections scarred and disabled. Panic erupted on his bridge. "What was that?" "What did you do?" he roared at Vance, his voice laced with a new kind of fear. "I did nothing." Vance replied, her voice soft, but clear across the channel. "You have just presented your case, and it has been judged." She felt an incredible sense of awe. The witness was not a weapon. It was an arbiter, a force of pure, incorruptible law. This sleeping power was a heritage, not a threat. Solon's light swirled faster this time. "Commander, the witness is now broadcasting on all frequencies. It is not a message. It is a ledger, a public record of the scrapper vessel's hostile actions, energy expenditure, and a legal finding of transgression based on the very codes we transmitted." The AI paused its logical processors, grappling with the new paradigm. It is teaching. The witness taught by numbers. It remembered by ledgers. It would never use a collar where a calculation would suffice. The system was now its classroom. The scrappers were the first lesson. Their ship was not destroyed, but it was neutered, its capacity for violence surgically removed. A cosmic justice had been meted out with scalpel-like precision. The two remaining scrapper vessels hesitated, their aggressive postures dissolving into uncertainty. They had come for scrap, for profit. They had found a power that did not understand greed, a force that answered violence with irrefutable logic. A new law had awakened in the obsidian anchorage. The old rules of claw and fang no longer applied. Their courage was a currency they could no longer afford. Yorick let out a slow, controlled breath. "Commander, they are turning back," and they were. The two scrapper ships, their engines glowing with panicked energy, were fleeing. They left their disabled leader behind, a testament to their failed crime. They wanted no part of this new, impossible reality. They had looked upon the face of an ancient authority and found themselves wanting. This place was no longer a tomb to be plundered. It was a throne room. "The witness is requesting a formal dialogue." Commander Lena reported, her voice filled with a reverence that hadn't been there before. It is asking for our credentials. It wishes to understand who woke it. Vance stepped forward, her shadow falling across the holotank. The weight of history of a dozen fallen empires seemed to settle on her shoulders. She was no longer just a scientist. She was an envoy, the first point of contact with a power that had slept since the dawn of civilization. She had to get this right. The fate of countless systems could depend on it. This moment was a fulcrum upon which the future would pivot. "Open the channel," Lena Vance said, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Let's make our formal introduction." Her mind raced, trying to comprehend the sheer scale of what had just happened. The witness was not merely an archive. It was a living embodiment of the law. It did not wield power through brute force, but through a perfect understanding of cause and effect. It had mirrored the scrappers' aggression back at them, not as an attack, but as a balanced equation. Hostility and liability out. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was a force that could reshape the galaxy, and it had chosen her as its first conversation. Her humility was now her greatest strength. Suddenly, a new alert blared through the bridge, a jarring, insistent alarm that shattered the solemn atmosphere. Multiple gravitic signatures dropping out of fold space, Jorik shouted, his placid demeanor gone, replaced by raw urgency. "Mandate fleet. It's the Adjudicators, 5 cruisers, 1 battle carrier. They're here." On the main viewer, 5 sleek, menacing ships of the Volterran Mandate materialized in a shimmer of distorted space-time. They were gunmetal gray, bristling with weapon emplacements, the very image of military authority. They were not here to observe. They were here to enforce. Their arrival was a hammer blow. A woman in the pristine white and gold of a Mandate adjudicator appeared on their main screen. Her face was severe, her eyes cold and analytical. She was Adjudicator Kyra Thorne, a name synonymous with unyielding adherence to Mandate law. Thorne was a legend, a legal purist who believed that any power not explicitly sanctioned by the Mandate was a threat to be neutralized. Her gaze was one of utter conviction. "Survey vessel Pathfinder," she began, her voice as cold and hard as steel. "You are in violation of Mandate Quarantine Order 314. You have activated a precursor artifact of unknown and unstable potential. By the authority vested in me, I order you to surrender your vessel and cede control of the artifact to my authority. Comply immediately, or we will open fire." There was no room for negotiation in her tone. It was an ultimatum, a declaration of absolute power. In a quiet legal archive on Volterra Prime, a junior scribe watched the live intelligence feed from the anchorage with a knot in his stomach. He saw the adjudicator's ultimatum and cross-referenced it with the newly public ledger being broadcast by the witness. The artifact's logic was flawless, its citation of interstellar precedent impeccable. The adjudicator's claim, however, was based on a quarantine order filed a mere 4 hours ago after they were already en route. It was a legal power grab, a retroactive justification for seizure. The scribe felt a chill. He was witnessing the law being used as a cudgel, not a shield. This was a perversion of the principles he had sworn to uphold. Vance stood her ground, the calm of the witness's presence a reassuring anchor. "Adjudicator Thorne, we have acted in accordance with our mandate and in defense of a priceless historical find. The entity you call an artifact is a sentient, lawful intelligence. It has harmed no one and has only acted to disable a direct threat." Thorne's lip curled into a sneer. "Your lawful intelligence is an unknown variable in a system that demands order. Its very existence is a disruption. Your sentimental attachment is irrelevant. You have 10 minutes to comply." The transmission ended abruptly. The Mandate ships began to move their formations, shifting into a classic orbital assault pattern. They were a closing fist of steel and doctrine. Solon's light pulsed with a grim finality. Commander, my analysis is complete. The Mandate fleet is not posturing. Their fire control systems are active and linked. They possess overwhelming tactical superiority. The probability of our survival in a direct confrontation is statistically 0. The AI's logic was a death sentence, and the witness Vance asked, her eyes still on the ancient obsidian ship. Its defensive capabilities are unknown, Solon admitted. It has demonstrated the ability to neutralize a single unsophisticated vessel. Against a coordinated military fleet employing advanced electronic warfare and phased energy lances, its performance cannot be accurately predicted. It is an unknown quantity. An unknown quantity. A wild card in a game where the house always won. Jorik's hands flew over his console. They're launching drone screens, Commander. Standard sensor jamming and decoy patterns. They're preparing the battlefield, boxing us in. Vance could feel the trap closing. Thorn wasn't just going to fire. She was going to dismantle their ability to see, to communicate, to react. She would reduce them to a blind target before delivering the killing blow. It was efficient, ruthless, and entirely within Mandate military doctrine. It was a perfectly executed act of lawful oppression. The Mandate's law had become a weapon. This was the true test. Not the brutish greed of the scrappers, but the rigid, fearful dogma of the Adjudicators. They feared what they couldn't control. They would smother a miracle just to maintain the status quo. She looked at the silver sigil on the witness's hull, the symbol of balance. Balance required two sides. Her side was currently facing annihilation. The equation was about to be solved with overwhelming force. Solon, she set a plan beginning to form in her mind, a desperate gambit that felt both insane and perfectly logical. The witness doesn't attack. It reflects. It balances the ledger. What if we give it a much, much bigger equation to solve? The AI's light seemed to dim for a moment as it processed the implication. Commander, such an action would be unpredictable. The energy release could be catastrophic. Unpredictable is our only currency right now, Vance countered. She turned to her crew, her voice imbued with a certainty she didn't entirely feel. We are not going to fight them. We are not going to run. We are going to show them the true meaning of the law. She would stand on the precedent of her own actions. The area around the obsidian anchorage was not just a graveyard. It was the ruin of a colossal precursor structure. Fragments of a shattered ring world, some the size of moons, drifted in silent orbits. They were composed of exotic materials, resonant and strange. They were the key. The witness was the arbiter, but these ruins could become its forum, a place for judgment on a system-wide scale. Lena, I want you to establish a link with the witness. Not a request, a partnership. Offer it our sensor data, our tactical readings, our understanding of the Mandate fleet's intentions. We need to teach it what it's looking at. Aye, Commander. Establishing data communion now. Yorick, plot a course. Take us into the densest part of the ring world debris field. Use the largest fragments as cover. We're going to give the Adjudicators a more complex tactical problem than they bargained for. This was a choice that would seal their fate. The Pathfinder's engines flared, pushing the small survey vessel towards the skeletal remains of the ancient ring world. The Mandate cruisers adjusted their course to follow their movements precise and coordinated. They were sharks, and she was leading them into a coral reef. The reef, however, was about to bite back. Thorn would see this as a cowardly act of desperation. She would be wrong. The witness acknowledged their data stream. The silver sigil on its hull brightened. It understood the threat. It understood the pieces on the board. A new transmission flowed from it, not of words, but of intent. It was an offer, a question. It showed Vance a vision, a schematic of the entire system. It highlighted the Ringworld fragments, the Mandate fleet, the disabled scrapper ship, and the Pathfinder. And it showed lines of energy vectors of cause and effect flowing between them. It was asking her to choose the equation. The power it held was a sacred trust. Vance felt the immense weight of that choice. She could ask it to destroy the Mandate fleet. The power was likely there. But that would make her no better than Thorn, using overwhelming force to solve a problem of principle. It would be a violation of everything she had argued for. That was the path of a tyrant. She had to choose another way, a path of justice, not vengeance. The plan is not to destroy them. She broadcast both to her crew and to the witness. The plan is to show them themselves. We will create a mirror, a perfect system-wide mirror. The witness seemed to agree. A pulse of energy, subtle and almost undetectable, emanated from its hull. It wasn't a weapon. It was a resonance pulse. It raced across the void and struck the nearest Ringworld fragment. The ancient metal of the ruin began to glow with a soft internal light. The fragment, once a dead piece of rock and metal, was now an active amplifier. The court was now in session. Thorn on the bridge of her battle carrier. Verdict saw the energy spike on her tactical display. What was that weapon discharge? Her sensor officer shook his head. Negative adjudicator. It's harmonic resonance. The artifact is causing the ring fragments to vibrate at a specific frequency. We're getting ghost signals everywhere. It's playing havoc with our targeting locks. Thorn's jaw tightened. A clever defensive trick, nothing more. An attempt to hide in a hall of mirrors. Filter it out. I want a firing solution on that survey ship, and target the artifact as well. If it insists on being a nuisance, we will make it silent permanently. The law was an instrument of control, and she was its master. The Mandate cruisers pushed deeper into the debris field, their sensor drones sweeping ahead, cutting through the interference. They were relentless, a machine of pure enforcement. They closed the distance, their main energy lances beginning to glow with stored power. The moment of violence was approaching. They were ready to pass judgment. Vance watched them come, her ship nestled in the shadow of a truly colossal piece of the ring. "Hold steady," she murmured, more to herself than to her crew. The witness was ready. The ring fragments were energized, turning the entire debris field into a colossal focusing array. The stage was set. The first Mandate cruiser obtained a clear lock. Enemy firing solution confirmed, Yorick called out. His voice strained. "Impact in 10 seconds. Now Vance said to the witness, a silent command of shared intent. The witness did not fire a weapon. It did not raise a shield. It simply opened the ledger. It took the energy signature from the Mandate cruiser, the exact frequency of its shields, the charge of its weapons, the pattern of its sensor sweeps, and it reflected that information across the entire debris field. The energized ring fragments became perfect mirrors, not of light, but of data. Suddenly, the Mandate cruiser found itself fighting not one ship, but thousands. Its sensors screamed, reporting an entire fleet of identical vessels emerging from the debris, each one a perfect copy of itself. Its targeting systems, overwhelmed by a flood of identical friendly fire prevention codes, began to fail. It was trying to target itself. The perfect order of the Mandate fleet was being turned against it. Thorn watched in disbelief as her lead cruiser began to fire wildly, its automated defense systems targeting the ghost signals, the data reflections of its own sister ships. "What is this? What sorcery is this?" she hissed. "It's not sorcery," Adjudicator Vance broadcast across all channels, her voice echoing through the chaos. "It is a receipt. You are seeing the cost of your own aggression. The witness is showing you the consequence of your actions, written in the language of your own technology." Another ring fragment flared to life, then another. The entire debris field was now a symphony of reflections. The Mandate fleet's own electronic warfare drones began to broadcast back at them, their jamming frequencies perfectly mirrored. Their communications became a cacophony of their own overlapping commands. They were drowning in a sea of themselves. Their rigid doctrine had no protocol for this. They could not fight a mirror. They were a hammer striking its own reflection. The witness was not a weapon. It was an arbiter of truth. And the truth for the Mandate fleet was that their perfect, orderly system was a weapon pointed at their own heart. The aggression they had brought to this system was now their own prison. The first reflection cascaded across the system. The Mandate fleet was a serpent eating its own tail. Cruisers fired on phantoms of their own, making their perfectly drilled formations dissolving into a confused melee. Automated point defense cannons tracked friendly transponders, their logic circuits screaming contradictions. The cold, orderly calculus of the Mandate's war machine had been turned into a feedback loop of pure chaos. Thorn's strategy had become her prison. On the bridge of the verdict adjudicator, Thorn watched the tactical display with a fury that burned away her composure. Her fleet, the very symbol of Mandate authority, was humiliating itself. Cease fire. All ships cease fire and recalibrate sensors. Isolate the source of the primary signal and ignore all ghost images. Use brute force filters if you have to. Her commands were sharp, a whip cracking through the panicked chatter. Her flag captain, a man with a face like carved granite, turned to her. Adjudicator, their electronic warfare is recursive. The more we filter, the more complex the reflections become. We're fighting our own shadow. Then we stop using weapons that cast a shadow, Thorn declared, her eyes glinting with ruthless resolve. This was a new escalation, a shift in tactics. Load kinetic penetrators. All ships forward batteries. I want a mass driver solution. There is no algorithm for a block of tungsten traveling at a measurable fraction of light. Target the artifact. Shatter it. This was the logic of a hammer that sees every problem as a nail. Vance saw the shift in energy signatures instantly. The glowing, humming lances of directed energy were fading, replaced by the clanking, mechanical thud of massive magnetic accelerators being charged. The mirror gambit was over. Kinetic slugs were physical objects, not waves of data to be reflected. They were a statement of dumb, undeniable force. The cost of victory was about to be paid in blood. They're switching to kinetics, Commander Jorik reported, his voice grim. They'll tear the witness apart, and us along with it. Before Vance could respond, the witness itself posed a new question. The data communion between it and the Pathfinder deepened. It was no longer just sharing sensor readings. It was sharing its nature. It showed her the core of its being, a vast, infinite ledger. Every action in the universe was an entry, every reaction a corresponding debit or credit. The Scrapper's attack was a minor entry, balanced and closed. Thorn's aggression was a massive looming debt. The witness did not understand vengeance, but it understood consequence. It understood the necessity of a balanced book. The law was a universal constant. It showed her what it could do next. Not a reflection of the past, but a projection of the immediate future. A calculation of consequence. It offered this power to her not as a weapon, but as a tool of instruction. It was asking her permission to teach its next and perhaps final lesson. Solon, can you facilitate this? Vance asked, her mind reeling with the sheer scale of the witness's proposal. Can we use our transmitters to help it shape the projection? The concept is unprecedented. The AI replied, its light swirling in a complex pattern of deep blues and purples. It would be akin to creating a system-wide shared waking dream. The energy requirements are staggering, but the ring fragments could serve as the projection medium. Yes, Commander. Theoretically, we can. Do it, she commanded. The decision felt momentous, a step beyond mere defense into the realm of profound communication. Adjudicator Thorn believes in order. Let's show her the true order of her choices. This was the moment she accepted her role not as a commander, but as a steward. As the Mandate cruisers aligned for their kinetic bombardment, the universe around them changed. The stars themselves seemed to dim. The glowing ring fragments which had been mirrors now became projectors. An image vast and hyper-realistic bloomed across the void. It was a perfect simulation of the next 90 seconds. On the bridge of the verdict, Thorn and her crew watched frozen in disbelief. They saw their own ships rendered in ghostly light fire their mass drivers. They saw the storm of tungsten slugs cross the distance. They saw the Witness make no move to evade. They saw the projectiles strike its obsidian hull, but there was no explosion. The moment of impact was silent. The slugs were simply absorbed, counted, entered into the ledger. And then the consequence was rendered. The simulation showed the obsidian hull pulsing, once a wave of pure gravitic force erupting outwards. It wasn't an explosion. It was a precise, calculated wave of space-time distortion. It struck their simulated fleet not with destructive power, but with irresistible, crushing force. They watched their phantom ships get twisted, their hulls groaning and buckling under impossible G-forces. They saw crew members themselves thrown against bulkheads. They witnessed the catastrophic failure of every system as the gravitic wave passed through them. It was a vision of absolute, inescapable defeat. The projection was more than visual. It was a sensory broadcast. The Mandate crews felt a phantom shudder run through their decks. They heard the ghostly scream of tearing metal in their comms. They felt a wave of simulated vertigo as their inner ears were assaulted by the gravitic distortion. It was a memory of a future that had not yet happened. The lesson was being taught in a language no one could ignore. The projection ended. The stars returned to their normal sharp brilliance. Silence descended thick and heavy. The Mandate fleet floated, their kinetic drivers charged and ready, their crews paralyzed by the vision they had just shared. They had seen their own destruction not as a threat, but as a foregone conclusion, a simple mathematical certainty. The cost had been made clear. A miner working the night shift on his small asteroid claim lowered his thermal imaging binoculars. He had seen it all, the ghost ships, the silent, terrifying battle that wasn't real. He looked at his sleeping child wrapped in a thin blanket on a nearby cot and sent a silent prayer of thanks to the ghost ship. He did not understand its methods, but he understood the peace it had just imposed. He logged the event in his personal records, a testament to the day a new law came to the anchorage. Adjudicator. Her flag captain asked, his voice barely a whisper. What are your orders? Kyra Thorne stood rigid, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. She had been shown a future she refused to accept. To her, this was not a lesson. It was a trick. A sophisticated psychological attack meant to make her hesitate to break her will. Her entire life had been a testament to the principle that will backed by force was the ultimate arbiter. She would not be undone by a magic lantern show. Her conviction was a shield against all doubt. It is a lie, she snarled, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. A projection, a grand deception. They are trying to make us flinch. We will not. All ships, fire at will. The order was a death sentence. Her flag captain stared at her, his face pale. He had seen the truth in the projection. He knew it was not a lie, but he was a soldier of the Mandate. He turned to his console. All ships, fire. His voice was hollow, the sound of a man following an order he knew to be wrong. They're firing, Jorek said, his voice flat with resignation. Vance watched the streaks of light from the mass drivers begin their silent journey across the void. Thorne had been given a chance to learn. She had chosen ignorance. She had been shown the balanced ledger, and she had chosen to plunge her account into a debt she could never repay. The time for lessons was over. Now it was time for the accounting. This was the final escalation. "Witness," she whispered, her hand resting on the cool glass of the main holotank. "Balance the books." The witness acted. As the first wave of tungsten slugs approached the obsidian hull, did not brace for impact. It did not raise a shield. The silver sigil of the scales on its bow flared with an intense, brilliant light, and from it a wave of force erupted just as the projection had shown. A perfectly controlled, precisely modulated gravitic wave. It was not an attack. It was an imposition of order. The kinetic slugs, traveling at incredible speeds, were suddenly subject to a new set of physical laws. Their velocity became a liability. The gravitic wave hit them, and their own immense momentum became a weapon turned upon themselves. The slugs, unable to withstand the sudden impossible shear forces, disintegrated into incandescent clouds of vaporized metal. They never reached their target. The wave continued washing over the Mandate fleet. It was not the crushing, destructive force from the simulation. The witness was not rendering the final, fatal judgment. It was making a different point. It was an act of absolute, non-lethal disarmament. On the bridge of the verdict, lights flickered and died. The hum of the ship's mighty engines fell silent. The gravitic wave passed through them not to crush, but to nullify. It didn't break the reactors. It gently but irresistibly quenched the fusion reactions within them. It didn't shatter the weapon systems. It drained their power capacitors and froze their loading mechanisms. Every system from the main guns to the life support recyclers was rendered inert. The entire fleet was dead in the water, a collection of powerless metal coffins. One of the stray kinetic slugs, its trajectory slightly altered by the edge of the gravitic wave, tumbled end over end. It wasn't vaporized, but it was now on a new course, a direct intercept for the Pathfinder. "Brace for impact," Jorek yelled, his hands flying to reinforce their section of the shields. The slug, a silent, dumb instrument of a war that was already over, struck their port side. The shields flared, absorbing most of the energy, but the physical impact was still immense. The ship groaned, the sound of stressed metal, a painful scream. Red emergency lights bathed the bridge in a bloody glow. An entire sensor nacelle was sheared away the wound, a gaping hole in their hull. The cost of victory had arrived. Vance was thrown from her feet, her shoulder striking the edge of a console. Pain, sharp and electric, shot up her arm. She pushed herself up, gritting her teeth against the agony. "Damage report. Port shields down 30%. We've lost the main sensor array. Breach on deck 4, but containment fields are holding. Minor injuries on the bridge." Lena reported, her voice steady despite the chaos. "But we're alive, Commander. We're alive." Vance looked at the main screen. The Mandate fleet floated silent and dark. Their running lights were out. Their engines were cold. They were utterly, completely helpless. The witness had not destroyed them. It had simply removed their ability to do harm. It had enforced a peace by rendering them incapable of making war. It was the ultimate expression of lawful power. The mirror had shown them their folly, the ledger had shown them the cost, and the final judgment had been a simple, elegant removal of their agency. A single channel opened from the disabled fleet. It was Adjudicator Thorn. Her face was illuminated by the faint glow of a backup emergency light. Her perfect uniform was slightly askew. Her expression was one of shattering, absolute defeat. The certainty that had defined her was gone, replaced by the hollow emptiness of a zealot whose God has just been proven false. She said nothing. She simply stared, her image a silent testament to her failure. Vance met her gaze. She did not feel triumph, only a profound sense of sorrow. Thorn was a casualty of her own inflexible law. The Obsidian anchorage is now under the protection of a new authority, Adjudicator Vance said, her voice clear and formal for the record. An authority that teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. This was the new precedent. Solon's light stabilized, returning to its cool blue. Commander, the witness is broadcasting again. It is a public declaration. It claims stewardship over this system. It is offering its services as an impartial arbiter for any and all interstellar disputes on the condition that all parties agree to be bound by its calculations of consequence. It has logged today's events as its foundational legal precedent. The AI paused. That precedent is now propagating through every public data network in the compact. Several legal academies are already citing it. Vance allowed herself a deep, shuddering breath. Her shoulder throbbed, a dull, physical reminder of the price they had paid. It was more than a victory. It was the birth of a new idea in the galaxy. A power that did not seek to rule but to balance. A force that did not conquer but merely judged. It was an anchor of pure law in a chaotic universe. Her doubt had been replaced by a heavy but profound sense of purpose. She was the steward of that purpose. She looked at the obsidian ship floating serene and untouched in the void. Its work was done. The arrays that had glowed with such power were cooling their silver light, dimming back to the softest of hums. On its bow, the sigil of the scales pulsed once a soft, final heartbeat of light, and then fell still. The ledger entry for this conflict was now closed, the account balanced. A new order had come to the stars, not born of fire and conquest, but of quiet, irrefutable mathematics. It was an awakening that would change the course of history, a promise that even in the cold, dark void, there was a place for perfect, unyielding justice. The law had finally found its voice.